Welcome back, guys, to another Dragon Ball Gekishin Squadra video. Today we are taking a look at the Season 2 patch notes for Gekishin Squadra. A lot of discourse about this all day today because this patch did hit the game early and people have already been playing with it all day, but it just wasn't made aware. But now we do officially have all the changes that we are going to be playing with for Season 2, and this is possibly the only patch that will happen prior to the Gekishin Squadra official first tournament. And the reason for that is because they're not doing a patch the first 2 weeks of December due to the tournament. And the next character dropping is during that tournament. So if we are getting a patch, it will not be played on that patch, and there will not be any changes. So as of right now, the only thing we know is that this is the patch that the tournament will be played on, which leaves me with a very big gripe that we will talk about when we get to it. But for now, let's go ahead and go through the changes that they did make. First off is the buff section. And we have our boy Bojack getting some pretty substantial buffs. His skill 1 damage has been increased at all levels, which is pretty nice. Now, even at level 1, it does more damage than it used to do at level 1 and 2, but not as much as 3. But by the time you get it to 2 skill points, it does do more damage than it did at level 3 before. Pretty nice change, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal as compared to his other changes here. On his skill 2, his bombs will take longer to explode, but they will come out about 0.4 seconds faster. Almost to be exact, it's going to be 0.32. That will make it to where he's able to move more freely. He's not as stationary, so he's harder to kind of catch. And he is also going to be able to have more time with those setups, and those bombs have to be respected more since they will be exploding by 1.5 seconds later. The other thing that is very, very major here, and this is the best buff that he got, is his skill 3 movement speed down effect has been increased by more than double. It is going from 15% to 40%, and he also will be able to move more freely once he uses that skill. So all in all, some pretty good buffs to Bojack. The other buff not listed here, which we did test, and is that Bojack ult feels a lot faster, and you're able to get just more damage out of it because it does feel faster. It does feel like it was sped up. So that is not listed here, but that is something that we did notice in game. Now, Android 17 also getting some massive buffs. For one, his skill 1, his primary secure skill, is having its cooldown reduced by 3 seconds, which is huge. And on top of that, his Android barrier is also having its cooldown reduced by 2 seconds. But the big change here, the duration of HP he gives has been increased by 1 second on his skill 3 and by 0.5 seconds on his ult, making it easier to get a lot more value out of that HP because it just lasts longer. You're going to be able to get more hits soaked up by that HP, and it has to be respected more. Now, Oob, we have here getting a very, very minor buff. This will not be enough to really put Oob into the metagame, but the buff he's getting is that his skill 3 charges, his dashes, will regenerate 1 second faster. Dabura, who is getting a massive buff here, but is probably still not going to be played a lot. But I do think he has potential. It's just not the meta for him because of how many range characters we have. But maybe once Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta drops, he'll be able to do a lot more with him, being able to block shots for him. But the main thing is the petrification gauge has been increased from 1 to 2 to 1 to 3 a second, which essentially is like double. It went from being 24 seconds to max gauge to 12 seconds now. And the other big buff here is his Darkness Spear, which used to be 3, 4, and 5 for duration of Vanishing Step, is now 4 at all levels. So you put 1 point into it now, and it's the equivalent of what it used to be at level 2. And the movement speed buff is also the same. It is equivalent to what it used to be at level 2. But the big thing is here, his skill 3 also got a 10% increase to the movement speed down. So most likely for Dabura now, the play is to max skill 3, put 1 point into skill 2, and then put the rest of your points into skill 1. And that should be the play for Mr. Dabura. Now, another buff section here, which is pretty important, is that there's a lot of divine cards that are getting buffed here. We have Build Up that is getting a 10 increase to all defense up, which this overall is 100 defense up, which will be very, very nice. This should equivalent to about 10% damage reduction, which is about where we are right now. Build Up right now gives about 20% reduction. This should push it up to 30%. And Steel Skin is kind of worded weird here. It says that it's reducing from 8 and now it's going to be doing 10, but when we tested it, it was doing 20. So we'll have to see how this plays out in game and see how that works. Guardian Angel getting a pretty nice buff. They're going from 15% to 20% damage reduction. And then the very, very major one here in tier 3 is going to be defense step, where the damage reduction defense step gives against super attacks is now going from 50% to 75%, which is basically the equivalent of barrier, but on your vanish against ultimates. And the other thing is against normal attacks that aren't ultimates, you still get an additional 30% damage reduction. Again, that is percentage. The only thing is you do have to time well with this, but this should be very, very valuable on tanks if they time it well against DPS ultimates, making it a lot easier for them to tank. So that's something DPS will have to look out for too as well. If somebody's playing defense step, you don't want to be ulting them until they vanish. Helper buffs is attack buff is getting more than a double increase here. Very, very substantial, which is probably going to be the best thing to choose now on attackers, because they increase the cooldown on one of the other attackers we'll go over. And all in all, this buff to the attack buff is probably just going to make it a lot easier for you to secure bosses faster and all those things. So it should most of the time now, especially with meat buns being gone, be the choice that you choose on attacker. The push one did also get the force movement distance increase from 3 to 5 meters. Defense buff is also getting a buff, getting 100 more defense, and the AoE is also increasing. Icarus is getting a cooldown nerf, making it easier to use because it's now going to be coming up 15 seconds faster. And Quick Zone getting a 15% movement speed up. These are all attempts to try to make you use these other helpers, but the problem with this is that they're not nerfing the helpers that are used, such as Rildo, but we'll get to that in the next section, which is the nerf section. But I will tell you right now, I am very disappointed with the nerf section. The buff section is pretty good. The buff section is pretty solid. I'm not too opposed with the buff section. I think the only character that should have gotten buff that didn't get a buff is Cell. I wish Oob's like skill 1 damage was increased more so than this, so that he has better secure in lane. But this is still useful, and Oob's not in that terrible of a spot. But I think the 17 buffs are great. Bojack buffs are great. Debur buffs are great. These divine card changes are all nice. These helper changes are all nice. But the big one that's missing here is Cell. I think Cell should have definitely gotten a buff here. He did not get that. Moving on to the nerf section, for some reason we have a nerf to skill 2 for Super Saiyan Goku, who's already been nerfed prior, but they're nerfing him skill 2 again. This is most likely is like a pre-game kind of thing where we are going to be getting Super Saiyan skill 2 damage buff, and that this is probably why this is being nerfed, is in preparation for that skill 2 damage buff. Super Saiyan 3 Goku seeing some massive nerfs, which was needed. His first hit damage on his Kamehameha is being reduced significantly. Now, at even level 3, it does less damage on its first hit than it used to do at level 3 prior to the nerf. Right? That is a substantial. It is doing 600 at level 3 now, where it used to do 960 for the first hit. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, though, they did make it to where the damage of the follow-up attacks, which used to be 90, 100, 120, is now 130 across all boards. So the follow-up damage on the Kamehameha will be more than it used to be before at all levels. The other change that they did make here is the IT Kamehameha, which used to do 960 on the first hit. It does do more damage on the IT Kamehameha than it does on the normal Kamehameha, so that's something to keep in mind. Before, it used to be the same, but now the IT Kamehameha does do more damage. And the damage when used as a follow-up is also going to be universal 130. So it is going to be doing more follow-up damage in general, but the initial burst is going to be doing less. So it's much more DPS focused rather than burst focused for Super Saiyan 3 Goku's Kamehameha now. And the other change is that when he ITs now, he'll be moved 1.5 meters away from the target. Kind of just something to keep in mind in regards to how you position your 3Q, because you're no longer ITing right on top of somebody. Now the big one here, my boy, as you guys know him, I love him. Cooler is getting some nerfs. His nerfs primarily is that his HP is being decreased, which I do think is subsidized by the changes to the defensive cards for tanks. So I do think that his HP being nerfed and his armor being nerfed here is not that big of a deal, because you'll get the increased defense from the new green cards. And the other change here is that his iframes are all getting an increase to where his iframes are all 0.2 seconds longer. That is very, very big. It will allow him to dodge a lot more damage, especially DPS wise, because we are in a DPS and burst kind of meta. With Cooler having that 0.2 increase, he's going to be able to dodge a lot more damage with his iframes, which is huge. But it's coming at the cost of an increased cooldown on his Destructive Ray, and increased cooldown on his Death Stopper, but the effect from his Death Stopper has like double the duration now. So all in all, Cooler was more so adjusted than he was nerfed. And he should still be very strong, but he's going to be much more skill based now because you do have to use his iframes properly. Otherwise, you will not be able to perform. Speaking of a character who's not skill based, though, we have Super Saiyan 2 Caulifla, who's getting a nerf to her Storm Kick, making it last a second longer, giving you a 0.7 second window where if Caulifla gets her advanced provoke off, you will have a 0.7 second window to not get provoked again. And the other change here is that her skill 2 now is going to be a much slower projectile, making it easier to dodge and counter. Her skill 3, though, is getting a massive buff, allowing her to be a better tank, where it has double the duration on the counter ability of her skill 3, but it does also have a longer cooldown. This will overall just make her a lot more valuable. She's going to be able to block more damage because of the skill 3. She's going to be less oppressive because of the skill 2 nerf. But this skill 1 nerf is basically nothing. You run one blue card on Caulifla and you can still perma-provoke someone. So skill 1 nerf is basically non-existent, but the skill 3 buff is very big, whereas the skill 2 nerf is not that important either. Next up is a Frieza nerf, making it to where his laning phase is worse because when he recalls Zarbon, it's going to be 2 seconds more until he can put him back down. Unnecessary. I don't think that Frieza was that strong in the current metagame anyways, but, you know, each their own. Super Saiyan Gotenks is getting a nerf already, making it to where his skill 1 is 2 seconds longer cooldown, making it to where we have to be a little bit smarter with that cooldown, but again, not that big of a nerf. He's still going to be about the same as what he was. But here's a big one. Wasabi Bomb is losing a massive chunk of damage. It's losing 50 damage and 100 damage and then 150 damage across the board on the initial bomb for the damage. And the secondary explosion, which usually happens with like Glorio or when the bomb hits somebody, things like that. Mainly the Glorio is what I believe causes this. It's either Glorio or skill 3, or if he just hits it with the melee. That secondary damage is now getting reduced to the point where it does almost the same damage at level 3 that it used to do at level 2 and almost even level 1 to a degree. But at level 1 especially, it's going from 1,100 to 850. Level 2, it's going from 1,300 to 1,000. And now you have to get it to level 3 for it to do as much damage as it does level 2. I think that is a good nerf for Wasabi Bomb, making it, because it does do very ludicrous damage right now, so it definitely needed this nerf. So that's a good direction that they did go ahead and decide to go in with Wasabi Bomb. I don't think anything else really needs adjustments on Mini Goku. This should hurt his lane phase a good chunk, and this should also hurt his late game a good chunk. But overall, pretty solid nerf. Very good direction to go with that. The only thing I will say here in regards to these nerfs is that I think they should have touched IT a little bit more, because IT still has a 28-second global teleport that he can use. That should not be 28 to 24 seconds. It's 24, I believe. But it should not have been untouched. They should have increased the cooldown on that and made it less oppressive, because it's currently way too free, especially on Superstar games. So I think they should have touched the IT there. And a big one, if you guys haven't noticed, that's missing here. Hit. Hit is being left completely untouched for this patch note, which is mind-boggling to me. He is one of the most oppressive characters in the game in the current meta right now. His ultimate alone is ridiculous, especially the range on it. And he's being left completely untouched in this patch note on this nerf section. Kind of insane. Not even kind of, just straight up insane. Ludicrous. Especially if this is the only patch note releasing prior to that tournament. That is ridiculous. The only other nerf here is that Crash is being increased from a 20-second cooldown to 60 seconds, and we're leaving Rildo, who is a very, very big helper in the meta right now, untouched. And they didn't even try to like buff Shu to try to counter Hit. So again, like Hit should have been touched in this patch note, and Rildo should have been touched. Those are the two things that are very absent from this that should have been here. But overall, a pretty solid nerf section. Now we have some adjustments. Some of these are just straight up buffs, others are nerfs. Ender Teen is getting a buff where now at even level 1, she has level 2 Destructo Discs at all times now. She does lose 1 Destructo Disc at max, but it makes her early game better because she has 2 Destructo Discs to stack her passive up now, because she did initially get that buff where her passive is only 4 stacks now. So she does have that available to her. Base Vegeta is getting an increase to his HP early game at the cost of a nerf to his HP late game. This will make his early game better, but his late game worse. Overall, it is a buff because his early game is where he was struggling more so than his late game. This one I'm not sure about. This will definitely require some testing, but the Gekishin burst system, including max burst, is going to be adjusted to correctly increase damage based on hero level and duration of battle. This could be a good thing, this could be a bad thing. This could mean that you do more damage, chip and otherwise, or less damage, chip and otherwise, depending on your level and how long the fight has been going on. But there's no way to like really see this without getting the data, so not much to talk about it, but just something to keep in mind. Couple different bug fixes here, nothing too major out of the 3 here. However, the big one that they did fix is an issue where any skill resulting in a warp, including special skills like Gohan's stun, could warp the user to an unintended location upon activation. This happened to Jordan a lot, where he'd get teleported to like the other side of the map. And the other one that they fixed is the boost attack, where an issue where using boost attack under the effects of finisher chance resulted from a triple boss KO. Players were able to KO heroes who had enough HP to survive a KO. So like people would be one-shotting people through barrier. And that was a bug, which they did go ahead and fix. All heroes are getting adjustments and fixes to their text, hero names, skill names, customizations, etc. Don't know what that means, but there's definitely like text changes throughout that I've seen. Like one for sure is like Kale. It says like Kale, Super Saiyan, Berserk, base form or whatever. They did also add the Divine Card Combo preset function, which you guys have access to, although I don't recommend using it. I think every game you might have to choose different cards, so there's no reason to really set it to auto. You can just do it yourself. But those are the patch notes going into Season 2. Overall, very, very good patch notes. Only 2 big things that I think are really missing. Well, 3. I think that Cell should have been buffed, Hit should have been nerfed, and Rildo should have been nerfed. The 4th thing, actually, that just came to mind because I did see the changes to Divine cards, Snowball and Barrier are being left untouched, but that is partially due to the fact that they're just trying to buff the other cards to be on their level or be able to counter them with like build up giving you more defense to counter Snowball, or defense step having value so you can opt out of taking Barrier and then you can try to take defense step instead because this is now Barrier level. So those are the kind of options you kind of have there, and that's the direction they're going with, which is why they chose not to nerf Snowball and Barrier, which we'll see how that works out. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. This is your boy Eisen, signing out.